What's up guys, how's it going? So in this video, we're going to be going over everything AWS Bedrock to quickly help you get started. So in this project, I'll show you kind of how everything works on AWS Bedrock, like how to get model access, compare different models, do some text generation, image generation, and also create your first chatbot like this. So this is a chatbot that I was using the OpenAI GPT model for, but I actually just refactored it to be able to hook up to the AWS Bedrock models. So this is using Claude 3, and we can just message our chatbot, which is like an AI girlfriend. Hi baby, how's it going? So this is going to send a response request to AWS Bedrock and give us a response back, and you can see that the prompt was to act like a girlfriend, and we correctly get that response. Okay, so first of all, what is Amazon Bedrock? Well, essentially, if you've used the OpenAI GPT models, you'll understand that using generative AI is just about passing a prompt to OpenAI and then getting a response back and then putting that response into your application. Well, the same thing is true for Amazon Bedrock. I think the main benefit here is that you're able to use all of these other models using the exact same API. The other big benefit is that this integrates really easily into your Amazon ecosystem. So if you use other AWS products like Lambda, serverless functions, EC2, API gateway, all of these things that you've probably already configured with your Amazon account, this is just one more service which kind of helps to keep everything encapsulated into one box. So just a quick overview of everything in Amazon Bedrock is that, once again, you can swap out the model really easily, as well as customize the model with your data. So you can create these RAG applications as well as build agents. Of course, everything related to security, privacy, and safety, which you can read more about here. But I think the main benefit here is that you're able to access all these models pretty easily and play around with them, seeing what kind of parameters they use, as well as be able to compare them side by side. So let's hop into the console. Okay, so let's take a deeper look into Bedrock. So to get there, just search up here in your Amazon console for Bedrock and you get to this page. Just hit get started. Now I actually have all of my model access in my US East 1 region, so make sure you change that accordingly. Basically, whatever region you're in is going to affect which models you have access to. So if you swap this region, you're going to have to re-request model access. So I've requested everything in US East 1 since that's where a lot of my clients are in. Okay, so it took about 2 minutes, but now you can see that Llama 2 Chat 13B has access granted. And for some of these models, you might have to input a short description of what you're using the model for, which I had to do for Claude 3. So just keep that in mind. Now that we have access to the Llama 2 Chat 13B model, we'll go into our playground, into the chat, and we'll select that Llama model down here, 13B, and apply it. And then we can start just with our default settings. So we'll set a high temperature to make it more random. We'll set a pretty normal p-value, and we'll just say, hi, how's it going? Let's get a response. So here you can see how the model reacts. Really verbose, pretty surprised by how much it's saying right now. But I guess it's because we set the temperature pretty high. And then the nice thing about it is that you can also see how long it took for it to respond. So in total, that response took about 10 seconds, and it tells you the input and output token costs. We can go to compare mode, and we can actually select another model. So let's select the Claude 3 Haiku model. And we'll enter a prompt and see how both of them react. So hi, what is LangChain? So this is going to call both of the models at the same time. And you can see here, you can kind of compare the latency. So Claude 3 was a lot faster, And you can kind of compare the results here. So on the left, it tells you about how LangChain is a blockchain technology, which is straight up the wrong answer, not what I was looking for. And you can see here on the right that Claude 3 Haiku actually knew everything that I wanted to know about LangChain. This is one kind of hint you can use from the model to determine how you can call it in your application. Basically, how you get to this is you go to Playgrounds under text and then hit View API request while there's some text in here. And it'll show you how you can make a request from your application. So you basically have to use this invoke model, pass in the model parameter, and pass in the body. So it's going to use that same parameters that you see here on the right hand side, which is temperature, max length, and the p-value. So if we go to our application, you can see here that I already have one of the examples loaded from Bedrock, which basically is just going to create that body. So use the model ID, use all those parameters, create a JSON body, and then call this generate text function up here. So all this is going to do is put all of that together, start our Boto 3 Python SDK so that we can connect to the AWS service, and then call this invoke model on the instance of the client. So the only other thing you need to make sure of here is that you add the correct region name that you have model access to. And I'll show you a common error that you might see. So AWS Bedrock llama.py. I'm going to call this file. It found my credentials, but it says that I don't have access to this model. And even if I go to the model access page, I might see that, hey, I do have access to these like Llama models, and the access is granted. But the issue is that you'll probably have a default region name on your Boto 3 client. So all you have to do is make sure that this matches the region name that you have in your console, which you can see up here. For me is US East 1 that I have model access for these models. So in every region, you have to request the model access to again. So now if I fix this to include the correct region name and I run my code again, it's basically going to create that API request. And I didn't even print anything out. So let me actually print out the result of this. So print main. So this is going to call the Llama 2 model. And I think it's just giving us a random prompt. So what is the average lifespan of a llama? And I got nothing back. What the heck is going on? Oh. I need to return the actual response. So there you go. This is the actual response from the Llama 2 model telling us the average lifespan of a llama. And here you can see that the response comes back in a generation key, but this is going to be different from model to model. So you can't just use this exact same JSON format, swap out meta Llama 2 for Claude 3. Basically, every single one of them is called a little bit differently. This is another common use case for calling the large language models, which is that you want to stream the response piece by piece to the user. For example, if there's a 10-second wait time, you don't want to let your user wait for 10 seconds to get a response back. So basically what we're going to use is the invoke model with response stream. So this is now using Claude 3 Sonnet. So the response body is a little bit different. Instead, we have to pass a list of messages from the user. So I'm just asking what is LangChain again. I have to pass my max tokens, temperature, top K, top P, as well as the stop sequence. You call it a little bit differently. It's different for every model. You pass the model ID, and then first I'm going to call this, but I'm going to print all my events from the body back piece by piece. So you can see here, it looks like gibberish, but basically line by line, you're going to have this chunk object with a bytes key with a content block start, which contains the first part of the text. It's going to contain the delta, and then to finish it, it's going to have a content block stop chunk object. So Looking at that piece by piece, it kind of looks like a mess, but let's comment this out and call it again. So we'll call AWS Bedrock Stream. And remember, the only difference here is that we're calling the invoke model with stream function. And you can see that it gives us the response back piece by piece, making it a lot better for our user to understand long responses, just like ChatGPT does. Now we're going to go over how to hook up the AWS Bedrock to some of your existing projects. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I will not show you how to actually build the front end, which can take a little bit of time. I'll just show you how to call the actual model by building an API. So first thing that we'll use is AWS Chalice, which is a serverless micro framework for working with AWS. Basically, if you've ever used AWS to create a Lambda function and then create the API gateway for like an API endpoint, you'll know that it takes quite a bit of time and troubleshooting to get the settings down properly. So Chalice is a framework for building those APIs, similar to if you've used Fast API or Django to build a Python backend before. This is going to do that, but much more simpler and for the final product of deploying to AWS. So they've got some pretty good instructions here on how to start your project quickly. All we're going to have to do is create a virtual environment, install Chalice using pip, and then make sure our AWS CLI is configured, and then we'll create a new project. So let's do that here. I'm in a blank repository, so I'm just going to do Python -m venv chalice env. So this is going to create a new virtual environment for me. Next, we're going to actually activate that environment. So we'll use the source chalice-env/bin/activate. So if you're on Windows, this command might be a little bit different, but make sure that you activate that environment. And then we're going to pip install Chalice. Wait for that to load. And then we'll also install Boto 3. So this is going to be for the AWS Python SDK. Okay, now that everything is configured and we have Chalice in our environment, we can use this command chalice new project hello world. So new project, and we'll call it Bedrock Chat App. So this is going to create a new Chalice application, which has a couple of things. So that's the environment, and this is the application. So this .chalice folder is going to have your configuration files. And then this app.py is going to be the main entry point to the app. So you can deploy the final API to API gateway, or you can just deploy locally to test it out. And we'll make sure that we CD into our new Bedrock chat app before we actually activate the environment. Now, if we go to the 127.0.0.1, which is the URL from here, we can see that if you go to this /endpoint, you should see this response, which is what we're seeing there. And we can just change it to hello YouTube. And this should refresh when I refresh the app. Okay, next we're going to create our actual file that contains the Bedrock service. So I'll create a new folder here called Chalice lib, and it has to be called Chalice lib so that the Chalice application can recognize it. And then I'll just create a bedrock services.py file. And here I'll paste all the functions that I described previously. So let's just test that we can call one of these functions in our endpoints. So I'm going to define a new app.route. And inside of here, I just need to describe what endpoint I have to call. So it's going to be /invoke. and put an arbitrary function name here. And then we're going to call one of the functions from the other page. So let's import from my Chalice lib .bedrock services. I'll import the invoke model AI 21, and this is just gonna call one of our functions. So give that a refresh and let your local environment reset. So basically when I hit the /invoke endpoint, it's going to call this function, and this function just runs a default query asking what is Amazon Bedrock. It's going to use the AI 21 Jurassic 1 model, pass in all of the default parameters, and then call the invoke model method and return us the response, which is in the completions.data.text key. So let's go to our /invoke. And this is going to take a couple seconds to load the actual response. And you can see that it understands what Amazon Bedrock is. Well, actually, this is the totally wrong answer, so make sure to check your model responses. Next, let's create another method. And this is going to be a post request to the /chat route. And this is basically going to take whatever the user puts in the JSON body, and it's going to take the message key from there and pass it to our chat Claude function. First, we'll need to pass the course config here so that we can access it from any location just for testing. And then let's also import the chat Claude model. Okay, so if I give this curl request just to test it out, and I pass in a simple message parameter, the app route is going to grab the message parameter and pass it to my chat Claude function. Okay, so in my chat Claude function, I'm once again calling the Boto 3 client. I'm passing the model ID for Claude 3, and I'm putting in this system prompt that it is the user's girlfriend. I give it some examples of how I want it to speak. And then I call the model, which is once again this invoke model method on the Boto 3 client. So let's test out hitting that endpoint, so you can see that it receives the message, how are you? And it gives us a response back like this. Okay, so we successfully got a response back. So let's now deploy the app and integrate it into our application. Okay, so now that we've tested that everything is working locally, we're gonna have to deploy our app to the API gateway now. So first, we'll add this policy-prod.json, and this is just from the policy editor from Amazon, giving us read access to the Bedrock foundational model, as well as the guardrail and provision models. Then we'll add a config.json file, and basically we'll have to add the autogen policy to false so that it's using this policy-prod.json file every single time, and we give it the name of that file. Finally, if you have any other requirements.txt, I just have my Boto 3 client here. You're going to have to put your dependencies there so that the Lambda function can deploy with your requirements. So we'll just type in Chalice deploy and we'll let that run. All right, so after you've run the Chalice deploy and there are no errors, you'll see that it creates you a new policy, it creates you a new Lambda function, and it creates you the REST API. So this is really the benefit of using Chalice, is that you don't have to set up all these services by yourself. It just automatically deploys it in this common framework. So we'll go to this REST API URL, and we can actually use this URL in our application, and it'll call the responses that we saw earlier. Okay, now this is a simple Next.js application that actually comes with my AI course. So if you're interested in actually building this out, check out the link in the description. But for keeping this tutorial short, all I'm doing here is creating an API request to my endpoint from earlier. So if we go back to the application, I just took the REST API URL, and then I put it here in my Next.js application, and then I just called the /chat. Then I created the body, which is basically only using this message parameter, which is the user message. And then it is going to return us the response. And we're going to grab the data.response key from the actual response. So if we go to our application, it's going to be calling this same API URL, and it's going to pass our message in the post body. So let's try it out. And you can see that it gives us that final response back. It also gives it in lowercase, which is exactly how I prompted it. And so yeah, that's basically the project. So that's the quick overview of Amazon Bedrock. I hope that you guys found this video interesting. And this is just one snippet of my AI project-based course. In this course, you can build chatbots, agents, do image generation, create voice-powered chatbots, and much more. We'll also use the latest language models from GPT-4 to Llama to Claude 3. And to make it all faster, we'll use services like Amazon Bedrock, as well as frameworks like LangChain for building our LLM applications a lot faster. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check out the link in the description. I'll also provide all of the source code for this tutorial if you sign up for that email list. So make sure to check that link in the description box below.